All right, everyone. I hope you're here for the panel. So, welcome to the panel discussion on.
I'm sorry, David. I can't quite hear what you're saying.
Hi. Welcome.
Everybody seems to be talking really loudly. It's hard to hear you.
Good. Thanks.
Worth a try.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll just get started, and hopefully we're interesting enough for people to pay attention. Like, who are those people having that really loud conversation? All right. So, this is a panel on shaping the future of Drupal. So we're going to talk a bit about Starshot and open source initiatives inside Drupal and open source development. So with me, I have Brian.
Brian Sharp.
Brian Sharp. All right. So Brian Sharp's from Consensus.
Yeah.
And what can you tell us about yourself, Brian?
Sure. Yeah. So myself and Dan are both from Consensus Enterprises. We, our coworker Christopher, that was supposed to be here, but he couldn't at the last minute, so we're stepping in to, be his role. I've been a Drupal developer and site builder since about 2002, 2003. So. When I first started off, Starshot was the kind of thing that I wanted, and why I would have been come to Drupal in the first place. So I'm now 2 decades in and more, and still with Drupal, loving it, and I hope that I can help make Starshot become something that brings more people into it.
All right.
I have lots of thoughts and questions, probably more questions than answers.
Well, this will be the place to ask them.
Yeah.
Dan.
Hi, Dan Friedman, Consensus Enterprises. It is going to be a little conversational, so feel free to move off the back wall and get a little closer so people can hear each other. Christopher Gervais, our colleague, could not make it today, so I'm here. Brian, as he mentioned, is sort of the more Drupal-y of us. I actually haven't been a Drupal developer, but I have made a lot of contributions recently to Aegir 3 and the forthcoming Aegir 5, which is a hosting platform for Drupal sites that's been around for quite some time. I've been on the internet in one way or another since about 1996, doing Perl and Java stuff in the old days, and these days doing more of what we like to call DevOps. And so that's why I'm interested in things like Aegir. It's why I'm interested in migration. So it was great to learn a lot from David about the default, migrate default content module just a few minutes ago. And I've also worked with Christopher on a bunch of our contributions to the Drupal Association with something called Rugged, which I'm happy to talk about, and which I think makes automatic updates really exciting and should, I would assume, probably be heavily baked into the way that Starshot works. So bringing software supply chain security to the Drupalverse and to Starshot in particular should be really exciting. Great, thank you so much. Check 1, 2. So I'm not going to repeat all of that. Dan Friedman, Consensus Enterprises, Aegir 5.
All right, Martin.
All right, probably a lot of you heard me talk enough about myself earlier. Maybe since we're talking about our origin stories, I'll say that my entry point into working on web development was Macromedia Flash, so that gives you an idea of how long ago that was. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Teresa Svinet. I work at Evolving Web. I'm a Drupal developer and also trainer. So I haven't been in development for that long.
Probably for those of you.
But, yeah, like fresh ideas. Yeah, and trying to lower the gap, like lower the entry barrier for people that is just starting in Drupal. So that's one of the things that I'm more passionate about. And open source, of course.
Perfect. All right, I guess I should introduce myself. Again, if you've been here all day, you might have heard from me before. David Pascadori. I'm the CTO of Coldfront Labs. Yes, I've been in web development in Drupal for a long time. I mean, we've been doing Coldfront, which has been exclusively Drupal since 2011, and we were doing Drupal well before that. Most of my career has been in some sort of web, mostly in the web sphere, either from the back end or the front end. So done and touched a lot of different Drupal stuff. So, but I'm fascinated to get your opinions about all sorts of things. So we'll start off, and luckily, most of what you've talked about your backgrounds lead into sort of the first question really well, which is what inspired Starshot, or what do you think two of them.
Yeah. Wow.
All right. Is this
Lecture?
maybe? All right. I'll let you guys talk. So let's we'll start off, I guess, Martin, with what inspired Starshot, and what would you hope to get out of it? I mean, not you, but you know, the global us.
I think a big part of it is just to make Drupal something that's easier for folks who are less technical to adopt. So, you know, whereas Drupal is great for people who understand how to stand up a web environment and use Composer and command line tools and a bunch of those other things. The reality is a lot of people who want to make websites don't want to use any of those. You know, they want to click a button and have an experience that's full featured and all of those things. And, you know, if we can't provide them with an experience that's that simple and that compelling, then we're going to lose out on those people. So I think it's a way to sort of help to draw them into showing them the power and the capability of Drupal.
I think another aspect to it is like Drupal has been very good at many things for a lot of time, but at the same time, at this point in time, it feels like it was falling behind against like older technologies. So Starshot is born as an attempt to lower that gap and actually jump ahead. So yeah.
You guys are just totally sharing and everything. This is fantastic.
Well, you know, so I wasn't around for the coming up with the ideas of Starshot, but why I'm excited about it and why I think, you know, is it's an inspiration to do it is, you know, like Drupal is really taken, you know, we have good enterprise, right? Like, you know, we definitely feel firm there, and you know, oftentimes when I'm like, you know, pitching Drupal or thinking about Drupal to, you know, a client. You know, it doesn't matter what, you know, I'm talking to, you know, the procurement people about, but sometimes the users there, they're used to WordPress, right? Or they're used to other things, and they're, no, Drupal's hard, we don't know Drupal. So reducing those barriers and creating familiarity with it, you know, like back in the day when I was building websites, you know, Drupal sites, you know, we were spinning up quick Drupal sites for, you know, a nonprofit, and, you know, getting paid $1,000 for it, and that was it, and then they were on Drupal. And all those people knew how to use Drupal, and when it came time to, you know, upgrading their sites, that was top of mind. So I think it's about sort of, you know, bringing back some of that brands to people who are, you know, who at one point will have decision-making power.
Yeah, I think talking about what's inspiring about Starshot is certainly both the opportunity to recapture some of that sort of old time. You know, that's why you've got a bunch of people who've been doing this for a long time up here, right? Is because it's got that air, that atmosphere of the smaller teams, you know, or even solo folks doing things where, like they used to. You know, one of the favorite quotes that I've heard is nobody got into activism as a backdoor into a career in system administration. Right, the smaller community-oriented folks that used to use Drupal more were doing it because it was one of a dozen other things that they had to do to actually accomplish the thing in the world that they wanted to accomplish, right? And Drupal has grown and it's become extremely powerful, which is awesome. But having a way for it to also be more approachable, I think, is really inspiring. The other really exciting thing for me as a person who's seen, you know, who sees the messes that can be made of trying to self-host Drupal every day, is the opportunity to bake some more best practices in at a foundational level, right? So the possibility of something like Igor, which has a bit of a reputation for being quite complicated, have a future offering that incorporates Starshot, not just incorporates Starshot, but a Starshot-like mode, where, you know, can we do Acre in easy mode, I think would be a really smart thing that'll allow people, like I started talking about, right? The sort of smaller organization that's looking that's their thoughts are on the thing they're trying to accomplish in the world, not necessarily the technical details. Allowing those folks to actually take the reins with self-hosting of Drupal for the future, I think is really exciting.
Okay. Just sort of dig in a bit, because Starshot is sort of an initiative that encompasses a whole set of different features and functionality. Like, nobody ever is going to be interacting with Starshot itself. It's just, you know, a set of goals for various things. So what specific functionalities, I think that would be sort of interesting to explore, because each of you sort of have a different opinion on, like, because it's all like, let's inspire Starshot, or what features you like, but you have different angles. So which parts of it, like, not specifically, but which things do you think will most accomplish those goals? Because a lot of that, your answer was about either making Drupal more accessible or more competitive and all those. So if you don't mind talking about the features you like that'll do that.
Yeah, I can start. So definitely recipes for me is the part that right away really clicked. I mean, I actually for a couple of years now have been working on a set of modules that are similar in concept to recipes, but they're sort of, they inherit the limitations of what you can do with configuration in a standard module unless you write, you know, like your own installer hooks and do a bunch of other things. Whereas one of the things that I think is super cool about recipes is this whole system of config actions that allow you to be much more flexible in terms of how you apply a set of functionality to not just a new site, but even existing sites. So, you know, that's one of the things with distributions was oftentimes they work really well if you start there, but it's not a set of capabilities that you can go back and say, I want this piece out of, you know, Commerce Kickstart and drop that into my site, because you're going to have all kinds of problems. So this idea of recipes as a more composable way of doing that same thing and having now this whole set of tools now to do very flexible things, you know, I'm really excited about that.
If I could just pause you guys right there. For the audience and aside, since we've talked a bit about recipes in Starshot, to understand a bit about recipes and what they are and what they do and why people are excited about them, in Starshot, there's a recipe called Web Forms. What this recipe does is it enables the web form module, the antibot module, the honeypot module, and then changes the config to enable honeypot and antibot on all web forms. That's sort of all it is. It's very basic, but it's an important part of setting up web forms. So as you can imagine, having recipes to do these specific things, to patch in those functionalities that sort of goes beyond just turning on a few modules, but actually having them work, is sort of how that is sort of applied and how recipes are going to be, or can be used, and how you can leverage them on your own sites. Just give a concrete example. If you've never heard of recipes before, it just sounds like cooking, but it's not. It sort of is. The recipe cooks itself, so it's not, I mean, the recipe is a recipe for the recipe. Sorry. Yeah?
Is that related at all to design patterns? Like back in the Java days and so on that I did, there's, like, that's a really important thing too, but I don't think you're quite talking the same thing here.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's overlap in the sense that it's sort of like trying to figure out what are the common use cases and then having individual recipes that address those, but then also can be sort of put together so that when a client comes to you and says, here are the 10 parts of our site that we need, if you have existing recipes, you can sort of almost like stand up a site really quickly that has like a basic version of all of that and then put that in front of them and then use that as a basis to say, now how is what you need different from this? As opposed to like having a spreadsheet that some customers get as like a set of spec requirements, but some customers are like, you may as well show me engineering blueprints because it doesn't make any sense to me.
So,
Yeah.
Joseph, and then we'll go to you, Jose.
Yeah, so like Java design patterns, I would say more like Starshot is more like a best practice almost like a design pattern for building out, certain types of, design goal to bring up a recipe in that sense, right? So.
Well, yeah, that's kind of where I think came from with that question.
Yeah.
I think it was a design problem as it's a way of solving a well-known and common problem.
Like in Java,
and like you're doing it at a fairly high level, like what you described for your recipes and stuff. That by
Well,
bringing modules together.
They do those specific things, and it's stuff that you could do, but it lets you automate them and then provide them as a functionality.
So, but are they focused on a problem? Like you're trying to say, I want to be able to do this in my site, do finance in my site as an example or something, procurement.
Well, so if you look at what's being proposed for Starshot, we're already talking about recipes for a better blog system. So, Drupal out of the box right now has articles, but there's a bunch of ways that that's like not really set up well for somebody who just wants to do fairly advanced blogging. So having it out of the box, more search engine optimized, being able to generate feeds that will be properly ingested by all of the different places you want your content to appear. Having it able to do more sophisticated versions of that out of the box is kind of what that recipe will be about. I've been working on the events recipe, and so that one is really about saying, we're going to create the content type, we're going to create a view, we're going to have, we could have it automatically place a block on the home page for upcoming events. There are companion recipes that will do things like create a calendar view. You can have ones that will add a field for referencing locations. Probably there's going to be a recipe for setting up registration for those events. So those are the kinds of ways you can sort of take that one core concept and then potentially also have sort of like companion recipes for the ways that are maybe less common, but still common enough that it's sort of like predictable that people oftentimes want these additional capabilities.
So I think, Jose, do you still have a question back there?
No, I was going to comment on it.
Oh, okay. We're good. All right, well then.
Hang on.
Oh, hey.
No, because a design pattern is more of an abstraction of a particular interaction. It's a higher level of abstraction. Whereas a recipe is really a concrete of a particular functionality. So the design pattern is really good.
It's a best practice for solving a problem.
Well, it's more of a conceptual framework for manipulative interaction.
Recipes are the coolest part. That's why I really wanted to make sure everyone understood them.
Yeah, I mean,
because they're so cool. It's what a lot of people have wanted for.
It's a fair point. I mean, like
for
a
while.
singleton is a very classic design pattern that sometimes will have a very specific, code handling type of flow. And recipe is not the same thing, but there's overlap in the idea of like, here's a common problem people have, and let's make it easier to solve that as opposed to having people constantly redo the same thing over and over.
But you wouldn't implement a singleton recipe.
No, I'm not talking design patterns at that level. I'm taking a higher level.
Oh, we can.
Anyway, we can move on.
Yeah.
We've got a question.
We have a recipe
Question over there.
Just for you, Martin, or whoever, but how are people going to discover the recipes? Like, is Starshot just going to come packaged with a bunch of recipes in place, or like as more recipes get added, like are people going to be able to contribute recipes, and how does that going to work?
So the answer to your questions is yes. Yes. Actually, Drupal 11 already comes with recipes, so if you do your standard install, it's using recipes there, but there are also in Starshot those additional set of recipes that are being developed. And then the whole idea is that the project browser will be a way of guiding people towards the sort of best ways to solve certain kinds of things in a way that doesn't require them to search through Drupal.org or packages or something like that. Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I also saw I might be making this up because I was looking at it recently. But on Drupal.org, you can if you can create projects, you can, one of the project types instead of module is recipe. Is it? Am I making that up?
No, so the guidance right now is to create a general project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't actually, there isn't actually a recipe type of project yet. Maybe there will be one day, I don't know. But.
Yeah, okay.
Might be a project attribute at some time.
I don't know, I saw it recently.
So right now, It's in your composer file. You set the type of the project as Drupal recipe, and the reason to use general project is for those types of projects. It doesn't try to do any sort of like fancy engineering of what composer data should be fed to packages. It just like takes whatever is in that composer.json and sends it directly.
Okay.
All right.
I
Oh,
think that's
sorry.
part of the Drupal.org overhaul, though, that's happening at the same time, is to accommodate recipes.
That's gonna be happening.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons they didn't call it module browser. They called it project browser, so that it could accommodate other types of Drupal.
Yeah, I think recently in one of the meetings with Chris or in the DrupalCon, I'm not quite sure, but he did mention that the idea was to make another type of project, which is for the recipes, so that we can actually search it just like the others, like themes and profiles and modules.
Well, thank goodness I didn't just make that up. That's
Yeah, no, it was there.
It was a
somewhere.
thing.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Also, something else about the recipes now, because people is interested on it, is like the idea also is like you're not going to be logged into the recipe. So it's just like a set of configuration steps that are going to be run like automatically if you want to apply the recipe, and then you don't really have to worry about, oh, the recipe is updated, so now I have to put it on, like the kind of issues that we were having with profiles and with distributions. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, excellent. All right.
Just a last point on that. I mean,
Okay.
now that you just said that, is a recipe more like just configuration then? Or will it have like module pieces at some point add
It's
that?
mostly, as I understand, it is mostly configuration. It cannot have modules inside, or maybe that changed. That changed. Okay.
No. I was trying to say you're exactly right. In fact, there's no ability to have code in a recipe.
Okay.
It's all it will do is provide configuration and essentially automating, to your point, stuff that a site builder could do if they had the Drupal expertise and the time to click around and do all the things. You know, the recipe basically is just a way of like a macro to do like potentially hours worth of work just by running a single command.
You can also put content in it.
So
That's
possibly, yeah, you can add default content in it, and at the end, if you still want to have some other code, what you will have to do is just create your module, like contrib module, and then of course enable it through your recipe. So you still could, but not inside of the recipe itself.
So we have a question in the back over there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the two examples that you talked about, articles for a blog and an event section of the website, in theory, recipe sounds great for those until you start getting into the details of like, oh, they both got to list up on the homepage. They're both going to include like their own view mode for card. Like, how do we deal with those kind of overlaps and collisions?
So the simple answer is that the recipe should, so you can use a config action, for example, like just the card view mode, you can basically say create if none exists. And then that way, each of the recipes can run that, and then if there's an existing view mode called card, no problem. It's just going to say, fine, there's one existing, I don't need to worry about it, but here's the view mode for events for the card, and then the blog one can say, here's how blog posts should be displayed as a card. So that's again one of the config actions that sort of makes it a much more elegant system than just pushing a bunch of config in through a module.
All right, I think Solomon, your hand up, but then after this, we're going to move on from recipes. Unless you guys really like recipes.
Recipes could conflict.
If recipes can conflict, I think they can, but
There's definitely a possibility. I mean, hopefully both recipes can be created in a way so that they won't. There's a few sort of nuanced things. So as long as any of the config that a recipe is trying to apply matches what's in the site, then there's no problem. So as a simple example, if you can put config into your module that's exactly the same as what's in the standard profile, and that's probably a good idea because not everybody's going to start with standard profile. The challenge becomes if somebody makes the same view mode because they started with the minimal install instead, but it's different from what standard would create, and then that at that point might be a problem for the recipe. So there's definitely potential where different recipes can try and provide conflicting config, at which point you might not be able to install them both. But hopefully the recipe authors will, figure that out. Maybe use config actions in some cases where they expect that there might be those kinds of issues. So yeah.
Would there be ways to debug that? Is there any way we can track back exactly what this applied code?
So when you try and apply a recipe, it usually will give you some kind of error output that you can sort of say, okay, well, it's this exact piece of config. Let me check it like a fresh export of the site config, and then I can compare those to see how are they different, and then figure out, like, do I just blow out what's in my thing, or I could like overwrite it with what the recipe is bringing in, or like, there's a bunch of different ways you could resolve it from that point.
So I actually have a question on that one, because I have looked at a bit of recipes. So I noticed that recipes are starting to include it's JS concept. So they include JavaScript tests to see if the recipe was installed correctly. We should at least notify you of that. But I know that isn't global. Is the idea for recipes that all of them will have their JavaScript tests they can run to double check? Or is this just sort of an extra thing, kind of like module tests that should be there?
I haven't personally heard of tests being included as part of the recipe spec yet.
Okay.
So I would say at this point, no, but that could be something in the future, I don't know.
Okay, because I know some of them have tests, but I don't know if it seems to be like extra, so.
Yeah. I know there's lots of test coverage on the config actions, but I haven't seen, like, for at least for recipes outside of core, that they have any tests, so.
Okay. All right, so maybe we'll move on beyond recipes. And so other things in Starshot that you're looking for, go back to the original question, to accomplish the goals that you were talking about.
Okay, one of the main things I think probably at this point, like of course we have the automatic updates in a project browser, which is what is enabling all of this, but then we also have the experience builder, so which is like the next generation of layout builder, and it is already on the 9th week of development, if I'm not wrong, or 10th actually. So I think that is going to be a huge thing as well. It contains a lot of improvements. It is being integrated with single directory components. It is going to provide a better way for the users to actually build their pages. So hopefully, right? Yeah. It includes a theme builder and everything, so you can even create your single directory components in the theme builder of the experience builder. So that is another huge piece of work that will come. But apart from that, there are also a bunch of recipes. So yeah.
So to take that a bit further, I think for everyone, what is a single directory component?
Oh, great. Great question. So a single directory component is basically, it's a new way of doing theming in Drupal, right? So it's basically a folder where you will have all the files that you actually need to build a particular component. So let's say you want to build, a postcard or something like that. An accordion.
I mean, an accordion. That's
an accordion.
That's better than a accordion.
Yes. So you can have your accordion, and then in the folder for the accordion, you're going to have the twig file. You're going to have a components.yaml file, which is going to contain all the metadata of your component. It's going to contain the CSS and the JavaScript files, which is different to the old way of doing Drupal, because before you had templates files in the templates folder, and then you have JavaScript in another place, and CSS in another place, and it was everything everywhere. So you always had to be looking at where you're putting your stuff, and you had to organize all of your code. And if 1 year later you needed to touch again that same piece of code, it was complex. So now with components or single directory components, that's not the case. Everything is in just one place. You can embed it and integrate it with all your type of entities in Drupal. That's totally fine, and just display the stuff. So it's really cool project.
Cool, perfect. Thank you. All right, down at this end. I guess, are you speaking as one?
This is, I don't know. Well, I haven't speak as two. You can't speak as two. This is the question about what's exciting to us as individuals about Starshot. I mean, like I say, at Consensus, my sort of field tends to be, again, I come at Drupal from this funny sideways 90-degree angle, where I'm interested in the deployment and hosting of it, the DevOps side of it. And one of the things that I see every day and that I hear about all the time are these different surveys that get done on, you know, what's out there in the world, and also, like I was saying before, the sort of tire fires that sometimes I see when I get to look behind the curtain at clients' production environments. And, you know, there's been, I would say, insufficient emphasis on security, software supply chain security, particularly in the past. And so you've had this proliferation of a certain kind of a mess. You know, when you look at the surveys about what kind of Drupal sites are actually out there and what kind of level of updatedness are they at. And so the importance, I think, of baking these efforts in from the get-go has, I think, been absorbed by the Drupal Association, and I think I'm excited to see that one of the things that we've helped them with is to get rugged in you know, moving in the direction of becoming part of just what's kind of there from the get-go, so that this is something that a lot of folks who are site builders are just never going to see. You're never going to interact with on a regular basis. It's just going to be a part of Composer. It's going to be just that Composer is, you know, getting the tough metadata from the Drupal Association's servers, and it's going to be making sure that the software that you think you're downloading is in fact the stuff that you wanted, that you're getting. And that's how it's supposed to be, right? You're supposed to not have to think about this stuff. A lot of people get into the sort of software supply chain security side of things. They take one look at it and they're like, my goodness, that's so complicated and hard to understand. And then it becomes a scary thing. It becomes a thing that oh, I have to hire a consultant to do. And what I'm really happy to see is that no, actually, the point is to just bake it into the infrastructure from the get-go. You're just using the same tools you've already used. Composer is just going to do this for you. The tough metadata servers are just going to be signing packages for you. Come to DrupalCon Barcelona and hear Christopher, who couldn't be here today, talk with the CEO of Packagist about how maybe we can get this happening at Packagist as well, right? So that it's just something you don't have to think about because it's just baked in, right? That's what's one of the things that's really exciting to me about Starshot, is that there's this opportunity for all these kind of really low level but super important improvements in very low level things that you don't want to have to be thinking about as a site builder. They'll just be there. They'll just be part of the environment. They'll just be part of the tool chain. And you'll be able to just rely on them. And so I think that's, for me, what's really exciting.
Great. Brian, you have anything
yeah, a little bit, I guess. I think part of that is you know, thinking about how Starshot is pushing forward some of these, you know, projects that have been sort of ongoing for a while. You know, like, so automatic updates has been something that people have wanted for a long time, and the speed at which it's happening is sort of just giving that extra drive to make it happen. And I know there's a lot of testing that still needs to be done, and figuring out how automatic updates are going to work in, you know, fit into, you know, our typical Git workflow, you know, and what that might look like. But I'm glad that it's being pushed forward, and I think that, you know, more eyes on it will help develop it further. And I know there's calls out right now for more testing on the automatic updates. So if anybody's interested in that, you know, take a look there.
There's another project.
Oh yeah, here. I just want to bring the mic down.
Sure, yeah.
Mine doesn't work this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another project that I forgot about before, but talking about like increasing the community and lowering the gap for like the entry barrier, there is another initiative as part of the Starshot, which is the Drupal on the edge. So now you can go to a particular URL and just hit enter, and then you will have your Drupal site up and running, and people can just start testing it there. They can just log in and use their site, and that is an initiative being led by Matt Clement, and it's going great, and I think it is going to facilitate a lot that new people get interested in Drupal, because now they will have a Starshot there. It's not just going to be core. So yeah.
That's the one where it runs Drupal like in WebAssembly. There's
Yes.
a WebAssembly platform to run PHP in the browser. So it's actually your browser in the back end, and it connects to a SQLite database and actually totally executes PHP in WebAssembly. And so your browser is the web server serving itself.
Yes,
That's the project.
that's exactly a project.
Yeah. So it's pretty neat because I've looked at some other projects for that one where they were emulating very, very old versions of Drupal in WebAssembly, which was sort of a blast from the past. You can go check those out. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, and I'm going to paraphrase, Starshot is kind of like a best practice of Drupal solutions delivery. Warm and fuzzy, press button easy. So this is like the design pattern of solutions delivery that you want to like.
I'm gonna steal
best
your
practice.
I'm gonna steal your question right now and,
Yeah.
and rephrase it into a
Sure,
short
sure.
one.
Alright.
If you could summarize what Starshot is to you, what would you summarize that initiative as?
Perfect. That's it.
Okay, so I think it is like a package, like it is an opinionated tool, right? So it is a separate product from Drupal core that includes Drupal core, but also it contains a lot of opinionated things.
Okay.
So it is just to facilitate the process and make it quick and easy for users to start using it. So I think that's how I will summarize it.
Yeah, I'm going to phrase it slightly different and just say it's a robust, easy to start spot for Drupal. So for people who have never used Drupal before, it gives them a better perspective on the kinds of things that Drupal is capable of. But for people who maybe even are experienced Drupal sites or Drupal developers, it means they, instead of starting at zero and installing the same modules again and again, they can have a set of best practices that they can use that are not just like what their agency uses, but across like all of the community, and so that becomes a much more solid, start for that development, even to go from there to custom development work as well.
Yeah, the excitement of being able to share best practices is really palpable. And remember, there's something that sort of hasn't been talked about. That there's a lot of like questions about what Starshot's going to be, and excited developers kind of poking around the edges and go, well, will it include this? Well, does it have that? We really shouldn't forget what Martin talked about this morning. I mean, I'm only tangentially aware of where it is in its evolution and where the milestones are, but he did say, if you want to contribute, here's how you do that. So like, if there's something you're really excited to see in Starshot, or something you're hoping is included, or a certain way that they're going to do a certain thing, that there is no them and us, right? It's just us. It's just the Drupal community at large. Please get involved. And I say that as someone who isn't even involved in the project. If you want to see it do a thing, go check it out and get involved and make sure it's doing the thing.
So I just want to quickly add to that to say that there was a survey posted, I think it was literally just yesterday, of the Starshot governance board basically saying, we want suggestions on what are the things that Starshot should be able to do out of the box, and which are the modules that it should include out of the box. So literally, if you have opinions on this matter, there is no time like the present. Go onto that survey and share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that Starshot is to me is that I think that's going to enable a new group of people who are, say like the Wix developers that are out there. Like, people will have these clients that are like, I can build you a site for $1,000. There's going to be a new group of people coming like that, and they're going to start being around, coming to these conferences, and that's great. I'm excited about that. And also, along with that, as someone who's in a Drupal agency, we're going to get people coming to us that says, okay, I installed on HostPapa 5 years ago this site, and when I go to look at it, it's up to date. Because the automatic updates have been in there, and so I'm not inheriting this mess.
Won't that be nice?
That they want some new features put in. I'm not having to sort of unravel everything. It's already sort of living up to some best practices, and they finally got money to buy this new feature. Great. We don't have to do everything from scratch.
Okay. All right, so we've been pretty optimistic so far, which is great. But let's to take a look at things the other way. So what are some challenges all these initiatives are going to have? I know one of them, of course, is there's a tight deadline, and those of us who have been around for a while know how Drupal is with deadlines. Drupal 7. Well, I was going to say Drupal 8. Drupal 8 was the one. We spent a long time waiting for that one, but I mean, we kept changing things and moving on. Is sort of not that Drupal 8 took a long time, but there was a lot of stuff to do, and then as things were done, there were newer things that need to get added in. Anyways, enough about Drupal 8. Don't need to defend Drupal 8. It's stable. It's deprecated. Anyways, so what do you think there are some challenges with the project? Yeah, you can start.
Okay, if I go first.
I don't mind at all.
So I think the thing that I'd be interested to hear actually from Martin about, or from the community about, what I foresee is actually what Brian just talked about, which is the influx of folks who are just going to be in it for the Starshot, right? So what is that going to? Where does that leave everybody else? What happens to sort of non-Starshot Drupal development from there? Number one. Number two, where does that leave already installed user base, right? So folks who aren't on Starshot today and have their site from House Papa 5 years ago, yes, it'll be great when 5 years from now, those are Starshot sites, but today they sure aren't. And so, it'll be interesting. I think that a big challenge will be that sort of the adoption of that kind of bigger legacy install base.
I mean, my perspective would be in my time in the Drupal community, I feel like we've always done a really good job of erring on the side of inclusion, so I wouldn't expect to see longtime Drupalists kind of look down their nose at sort of like Starshot newcomers, but I mean, there may be people who feel that way, I don't know. Sorry, remind me, what was the second part?
I think it's that legacy adoption or migration part.
So I think to answer the second part, it's like, one of the things that I think is amazing about Starshot is that it really is all sort of modular and composable. So will you be able to install Starshot on your 5-year-old site? No, but all of the pieces are there, right? So you'll be able to install automatic updates on that site and to be able to use it and now start to take advantage of those things. If you needed to add an event system, you certainly wouldn't be able to install Starshot and then use its event system, but there's a good chance that event system will be its own project that you can just say, give me that one piece, and now you have that, even though your site was based on something completely different. So to me, the composability of it sort of addresses, hopefully, that part of it. Do you have a...
Sure.
Concern for the challenge?
The challenge. Well, one of the things I was thinking about this morning was, I think Drupal attracts a lot of people who like to tinker with sites, right? And so I'm wondering, someone who's just new to Drupal and wants to, install Starshot, and then they like it and they start tinkering with it, where's the point where they need to be ready to commit to doing things, the Drupal core, and working in the workflows that we're used to? So maybe having an understanding of what that transition would be like for people who are moving, rather than just kind of assuming they'll just get there. They might hit some roadblocks all of a sudden where they're like, oh, okay, now I have to learn this new composer, or I don't know, something to think about.
That sounds like a challenge. But I mean, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a valid question. I mean, even the process right now of saying, I've built the Starshot in WebAssembly and I've done a bunch of cool things and now I'm ready to make that live to the world. The process of turning that into a site that's hosted, as we talked about this morning, that's definitely an intention, is to make that as seamless an experience as possible, but I don't think today we know what those steps are. So, there's definitely, some questions there that we're gonna have to wait and see what, as a community, we can do to make that as easy an experience as possible.
Do you have any challenges that you're worried about? Or
to me, what I feel like I've already seen, I mean, number one, there's a whole bunch of skepticism, as you said, from people who have been in the community and been like, yeah, workspaces took 5 years to get stable, so how are we going to get this thing done in 5 months? Which I sort of get. But also I feel like trying to make these kinds of decisions when there's going to be such a wealth of different perspectives on things. I feel like, to me, being able to navigate that in a way that leaves everybody still feeling like they're all part of the same team and not like, well, I really wanted it to go this way, and then, you know, the decision was made to go the other way, so I'm out. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's going to have to be a lot of care there, and also people just being able to say, like, so I was at a conference one time and the facilitator had the saying that I thought was great. It was, an adult conversation is where everyone says what they want, but is willing to accept no for an answer. And I'm hoping that people can bring that level of maturity to Starshot.
All right.
Yeah, I think I'm on you on that one, because it is like it will require a lot of care and transparency into how decisions are made, right? Because right now we have a lot of tracks and we have to get a lot of proposals for many different topics into what are the recipes that are going to be included on a Starshot by default. Or to be allowed to present to the user so they can choose something. So I think a lot of transparency and care, but also talking about the deadlines and such, how we can drive or improve the community engagement into all of that, because a lot of times there's a lot of people that want to contribute. Like, and I'm guilty of this that I'm saying right now. I sometimes want to, or not sometimes, most of the times, all the time, I want to contribute more, but, and I know a lot of people is in the same boat, but then we want to, and sometimes it just slows down, and it's not that possible, or maybe it is not as clear how to get involved. So how we're going to, as a community, like, drive that faster and keep the momentum and get people interested and to actually commit to deliver some stuff.
Okay, so we are almost out of time, but I don't want to leave it on what was one of the biggest challenges. So we'll do a quick last round. I mean, we've all been open sourcers for a long time. We've seen a lot of changes happen within the open source development community. So what can you talk about briefly? The future of open source development and how it is in sort of the brave new internet in the state of things the way they are. So is that not specific enough? You're looking at me like that's too broad a question.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, sure. I think the key thing to remember about when you say open source is that it's an ecosystem, right? It's not just Drupal. It's not just Starshot. It's not just, Ager. It's not just whatever piece of it that you're interested, that you happen to be interested in, because that's your particular specialization. You have to be able to see the full stack and all the different alternatives and all the different ways that all the people you're interacting with are going to be seeing it, including the folks who are designers, the folks who are decision makers who might not necessarily be, and I really hate this word, technical, right? But yeah, everybody's a person. They've all got things that they're supposed to be getting done today, or this week, or this month, or this year, or the next 5 months, right? And so I think the most important thing in the open source world in particular is being able to see other people's points of view and values. To get back to that adult conversation thing, I think one of the things that's happening on the internet today that we see a lot of is this kind of factionalization and fragmenting in a lot of different areas of society are being driven by clicks and views and likes and advertising dollars. And I think that what the open source community has a really good history of is engendering those more adult conversations where people step back for a second and see the whole picture. And so I think what's really exciting about Starshot is the capacity that it's going to build into Drupal for us to keep that kind of conversation going into the future. Because Starshot's not going to just be a one-time thing, I don't imagine. If it is this big strategic play for Drupal to be able to catch up to things like a WordPress or a Wix, that's not a thing that we're going to do just once. Right? That's a thing we're going to have to keep doing as a community. And so that means that the governance process that I think, sorry, I actually just forgot your name. Elisa just talked about, or that adult conversation part that Martin talked about, and I think that those things are all, those are all positive examples that as a community we can embrace. And that ecosystem perspective means we aren't just collapsing into our own little, tribe. So I think that's what's hopeful for me.
Well, I think that is exactly the optimistic kind of close I wanted to get to. I hate to cut you guys off. That's the perfect end. But what I'm going to do, because we have just a couple more minutes before we're going to get kicked off, is if there's any questions, any other questions, I'll open these guys up to you. Matt.
Right, so the Starshot, great. Worried about people building buffet sites, but that's fine. But speaking of which, when a lot of everything on Drupal.org is currently free. You install a module, you get that functionality. But sometimes you get people that they need support, they need help, so they ask a question. And so we have an issue where you can log on the question for support, but those don't often get as much attention as the ones that are like, here's a bug fix, here's a bug I ran into, here's a patches, or whatever. So if we have, let's say, we're talking about 3 million WordPress sites versus 300,000 Drupal sites, whatever. Let's say we even double or triple the number of stuff. So all of a sudden we have all these people who are installing things, who are, something might be broken, do we have a support structure to have to handle questions when things don't go right, or they've installed literally the kitchen sink, and they're all working together. I don't know, because people in the WordPress will plug in, some plugins are paid for, so you get a little bit of support there. But I don't think there's anything planned for paid recipes or anything like that. And so some people might feel entitled to get support, some might not, if they can't afford. So is there any plans for boosting that side of things?
Is there anything anyone wants to comment on? Or
That's a good support.
I certainly haven't heard of any changes in terms of having sort of paid models for that. I mean, I certainly feel like if you go to certain project pages, people will say, I'll support this on sort of a best effort capability, but reach out to me if you want to pay me to actually support you or do those, and I think that's totally fair. So it's yeah, if this module is critical to your business, you should probably expect to, pony up some dough and make sure that it's going to be supported in a way that lines up with, what your business needs. So I don't see that that's offside, but I don't see any kind of well, I'm a member that pays $100 a month for this module or anything like that. That's Nick.
All right, we'll go with Joseph, and then that will be the last question.
So, yeah, I do have a question. So this week, Sunday, I published a new version of a module on the contrib module called Access Unpublished Linked Nodes. It's a pretty cool module, and I refactored the code, so it's now using a text plugin for formatted text. So I was like, oh, I want this super easy for everybody to install this module, so they don't have to go around and click, click, click. So I made a hook install that goes through, and I was like, oh, wait a second, well, I don't want this plugin to be on plain text and the web form plugin. So I just said, okay, if it's got web form and the plugin in the formatter text machine name, it skips it, and it skips plain text. So I was like, okay, so now you install the module, runs the hook install. The plugin weight is set to 299 because I want it to run last. And then what this does, this module, it extends the functionality of Access Unpublished. So now when you got a token to access a draft node, you won't just see that node page. You will be able to, if you have draft links that were, with linked links, those will now have tokens themselves. So you can now click on the draft link, and you can access with a token, with a valid token, the subsequent thing. Yeah. So basically, here's my thing: is I've set this up with a hook install to be easy to install for, it's going to set up your text formats. Is that, so where at some point, is there some kind of contrib module? There's going to have to be some kind of a contrib module design, like guideline or something to say, is this going to be compatible with the recipe? Whereas, okay, so I'm doing hook install to do configs and dynamically inserting configurations. Like now, if I'm forcing the hand at the configurations with the module install, well, all of a sudden now the Starshot distro might want to use my module, but then maybe do I have to like fork the module, or is there like some kind of thing?
If I can just sort of summarize quickly.
Yeah.
Will poor Joseph have to change it?
Yes. So I would say the simple answer is probably not. I mean, you know, you can't foresee every possible use case. Yeah. But there is within the recipe system a way to install a module without it installing its config. So if there was that case where a recipe that was either part of Starshot or adjacent to Starshot, or even not related, but somehow wanted to use that module, but found that that installer creates some issues that you can basically
creates a mess or something.
Yeah. So basically, you actually in the recipe have to explicitly say install this module's config. So if you just leave that out, then it won't.
Okay, because there's a couple of different, there's like an install folder for your config.
I think we need to take this offline at this point.
Anyway, that's cool.
But anyways, I would like to thank the panelists very much. Brian, Dan, Martin, Riza. Thank you so much for coming here and talking about everything. I had a great time, so it was excellent. So thanks, and we'll take the stage for next time.